On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Wilkes-Barre area, I'd like to thank all of you for coming today and attending our legislative breakfast. Each year I look forward to this event. It's probably my favorite event of the League, although it's hard to choose. I always come away from here feeling more informed, closer to my legislators, understanding a little bit more my role in civic participation and life. So I'd like to thank you for your continued support. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank Kings. I think we've had this event here for at least 8 or more years consecutively. They always do a great job. They're very attentive. This year I even got a stool to sit on, so I earned a chair. I'd also like to thank my student Kristen Kalish. I teach at Lake Lehman, and she devoted her community service hours for her senior project with the League this year, and she's helped out with all our events, and it has been a tremendous help. So I wanted to acknowledge Kristen and some of my other students. Obviously, this event wouldn't be a success without the participation of our legislators. And they always do such a great job with getting back to me, and they're enthusiastic about attending. I never have to worry about that. So I really appreciate their coming here and participating. Representative Boback, Representative Kavulik, and Senator Baker could not be here today. I spoke with them individually, and I know that they really wanted to be here, but they had other commitments that conflicted with this morning's event. So I will, before I introduce the legislators, I just want to tell you a little bit about the format. We're a little more open this year, unfortunately, because of the budget impasse. We do want to we realize there's going to be some conversation and talk about that. So we will begin with a question about that, and I will provide some suggestions about what our audience members in the League would like to hear. And then we'll take questions from the audience, and I'm going to provide several options for the legislators to address what issues they think they can best answer. So we have more time and we cover more topics. The answers will be limited to, for the budget question, 3 minutes per response, and after that I will kindly interrupt you and try to get you to wrap up. The other questions will be 2 minutes. There are index cards and pencils on the tables if you'd like to submit a question, and League representatives will be around to bring those up to me. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our legislators. First, here we have Representative Jerry Mullery from the 119th District, Representative Aaron Coffer from the 120th District, Senator John Blake from the 22nd District, Representative Mike Carroll from the 118th District, Representative Eddie Dapashinsky from the 121st District, Representative Tara Toohill from the 116th District, and Senator John Udicek from the 14th District. Thanks again for being here today. The first question we prepared was, please give us your thoughts on the budget impasse. I think we're all frustrated, but I think the legislators can give us more insight into what they believe can be improved to get our government working again. And instead of making this a finger pointing or a blame kind of game, I would like them to individually address how this impasse has affected their constituents and their legislative agendas, what they've done to try to remedy it, work with the leadership, and any suggestions for the future. I have a few comments from the audience saying what is going to prevent this from happening again, and another specific question in regards to the emergency funds. What was that money used for? So we'll start with Representative Mullery.
Okay. Did everybody hear me?
Yes. You have 3 minutes.
There was a lot of questions intertwined in what was just said there, so I'll try to address as many of them as I can. How do we feel about what's happening in Harrisburg right now? The word frustration, I think, is something that is being shared by all 203 members of the House and 50 members of the Senate. I go a step further, and I know a lot of my colleagues here at the table feel embarrassed that we have been unable to reach an amicable compromise on the direction and future for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I've said right from the start that when you have 4 months from the governor's budget speech to negotiate a compromise and can't get that done, and then now approaching 8 months post-deadline where we've been unable to get it done, it's a reflection in the public's eye and in mine on our ability to do our job effectively. And that's why it's an embarrassment. And unfortunately, what has caused a lot of these similar problems in Washington, D.C. have begun to rear their ugly head in Harrisburg. We have small groups of ideologues in both parties who seem more set on not governing than governing, who have come out either at events in their district or on social media and have taken a hard line on positions that then prevent them from being able to compromise. And if you are not able to compromise in your local township government, on your school board, or in Harrisburg or Washington, D.C., you're not going to get anything done. And a lot of the items that we are going to address today, we were asked about to prepare statements about redistricting and campaign finance reform. All of those have led us to where we are today, where you have folks being elected in primary-only elections because of the way the districts have been redrawn, that we've been able to put people in office who have gotten there because they represent a small group of either the extreme conservative or extreme liberal wing of their parties. Now, fortunately for us in northeastern Pennsylvania, as you look across the people sitting at this table, we're loaded with moderates. But we are the minority in Harrisburg. Everybody at this table is willing to compromise in Harrisburg to reach a budget deal. Unfortunately, that message is not being received by our leaders, and our leaders are unable to convey that message and convey an air of compromise with those who are at the far wings of each party. And I believe that's what's caused us to have this impasse, and until we're able to break through that, I don't know how much progress we're going to make in the immediate future.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Aaron Coffer.
Thank you. And I think Jerry touched on several key points of what he just mentioned. And it's extremism on both sides. I think very often it's painted as, Republican extremism or what. That's typically what I see more often. But it's both sides. And moderates' voices have been drowned out in our current system. And I truly don't believe we're going to change the results we're getting out of government until we change the system itself. I mean, yesterday, a few of us were at a similar panel up in Scranton talking about, we talked about campaign finance reform again. We talked about creating a bipartisan caucus instead of just a Republican and Democratic caucus, actually having an independent caucus where people can come together to actually talk about ideas openly that can actually get this process moving along. I think we're at such an unhealthy part of government right now. I think people are fed up all the way from Washington, D.C. to Harrisburg to every level. People are fed up. And we're right now, I believe, at one of the most unhealthy points of democratic debate that we've ever had. And if we're actually going to talk about how we are going to move our system forward, we actually have to have the conversation about how we're going to change the system itself. And I think that's where we've been lacking in the conversation. We're so quick to jump on one issue or another, but the system right now is created so that it isn't going to create compromise. We mentioned gerrymandering. And I've seen letters to the editor from Jerry before talking about the redistricting process. When we have party leaders controlling the way that we draw our districts, Pennsylvania, they did a study of all the districts for U.S. Congress across the United States. And actually, I'm pretty sure Pennsylvania had 4 of the top 10 most corrupt congressional districts. The number one I got a kick out of, because it was actually in Chicago. What they did was they took both sides of the city and they connected the district by a highway. Now, I know we have an issue with homeless people, but I mean, I don't think there's many people living along the highway to connect that district together. It's all done by party ideologues trying to buffer in districts, and you look at the money influence that's going on both sides of the aisle. Democratic special interests, Republican special interests, you have people threatening money. That to the point now on the presidential level, you need billionaires running for office in order to get traction going. We have to change the system. Now, I'm part of our government reform caucus. I'm very vocal in there. I truly don't believe until we get serious about changing the system. Now, Mike just found this out yesterday, but I wear an orange tie every day, except for July 4th. I do wear a red, white, and blue one. But every day I wear an orange tie as a sign of government reform. Because I truly believe until we change the system, and that's the two-party system. George Washington, when he left office, forewarned us that when he gave it in 1796, leaving the presidency, I have no political ambition, I'm leaving the presidency, beware political factions. We didn't listen, we're at an unhealthy level of debate, and I hope we have a serious conversation about changing the system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we continue, I just want to remind the legislators that I have a question here saying, what is the difference between today and 20 years ago? And also, more specifically, I did have a question, if you care to address it, about where the emergency funds were spent. So,
Can I follow up on that?
no, we're going to move on.
Sorry. I thought there was a follow-up.
That's all right.
I apologize.
That's all right. Senator Blake.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks to the League for hosting us. I appreciate this opportunity. So I'll echo the sentiments of my House colleagues about the level of frustration. I would tell you, we have divided government. We have divided government insofar as we have a governor in the Democratic Party who is elected on a statewide ballot, not subject to the individual districts of our members of the General Assembly. And then you have entrenched Republican majorities in both houses. And within those entrenched Republican majorities are very hardline conservatives. And the representative's right. We've got them on our side too, that hold to the ideology of the left. But listen, we have to, even if we wanted to change the redistricting process, even if tomorrow there was a complete consensus will to change the redistricting process, you know how long it would take? Anybody in this room? 5 years. It would take 5 if tomorrow we had consensus to get it done. And we don't. And we don't. Which means we have to do our job. And you have to hold us accountable, and we have to go back to Harrisburg and figure out how to thread the needle on a deal that can get 102 votes in the House, 26 votes in the Senate, and 1 signature by the governor. I want to answer specifically the questions on the emergency funding. It's really not emergency funding, notwithstanding the reporting that you're hearing. Turns out that in December, the governor got a bill to his desk that passed the House, that passed the Senate, and that he signed. So we, for all intents and purposes, have a state budget. But in signing that budget, he blue-lined about $6.5 billion worth of spending. So the budget that we have is not so much emergency funding as much as it's general fund authorization and appropriation, and those dollars are going out to our schools, they're going out to our counties, they're going out to our nonprofits, they're going out to any state-funded entity across the Commonwealth, but they are not fully funded. They are not fully funded because of the blue lines. And we will face another crisis if we don't address that problem. That's one thing. The other thing is, how did it affect my constituency and what was going on? I met with my superintendents almost on a biweekly basis throughout the impasse. And never did I meet a more beleaguered set of people. Never. They were between a rock and a hard place. I had literally phone calls with the business administrator at the Scranton School District before going to the floor anticipating a vote on a stopgap budget, and wondering whether or not they can close a deal with PNC Bank to borrow $40 million to keep their doors open. And it's cost our schools tons of money to borrow to stay open. That's a problem. The nonprofits, I have to commend Lackawanna County. Lackawanna County commissioners back home, they literally lent money to make sure that the domestic violence services in my county were not interrupted. They actually helped some of the nonprofits to make sure that those services can continue to be provided. And they were backfilled when we did the partial budget. So, I'm done.
Thank you.
I just got the stop sign.
I wanted to remind the audience that we're happy to have your questions, but we'd ask that they be addressed to all the legislators. Okay, Representative Mike Carroll?
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. It really is a great pleasure to be here today and to talk about these sorts of issues. As I said to some folks earlier, these forums are my favorite type of events because of the give and take and the dialogue. You know, my perspective on what's happening in Harrisburg, generally speaking, is the beginning of the conversation for me is identical to what Senator Blake said, and that is we do have divided government. I mean, the people of this Commonwealth elected Tom Wolf governor. And from what I see, from my perspective in the General Assembly and the House in particular, is a denial in a lot of ways of the reality that Tom Wolf is governor, and that there will be no final agreement with respect to a budget until both parties, the majority party in the House and in the Senate, working hopefully with the minority party, but also working and getting an agreement with the governor. It's not enough just to pass a budget in the House and the Senate with simply Republican votes and ignore the reality of Tom Wolf's governorship. So, you know, having said that, we've, you know, struggled through an 8-month cycle without an agreement, with the exception I would highlight of end of December, where there was an agreement that was reached in the House and a recorded vote on second consideration for a budget agreement. And a recorded vote that garnered more than 102 votes, Democrats and Republicans, in an effort to try and reach a final agreement that the governor would support. Sadly, the final consideration vote for the next day did not occur. The House Republican leadership, there's no other way to say it, decided not to have that vote, and instead went in a different direction and passed a budget that the governor had declared all along that he was not going to support. And so here we are. We need to have governing in this state. There is, as I mentioned it to Tom when I got here this morning, when I first started in the world of campaigning and government many, many years ago, I often heard somebody say something like this: I hate everything that goes along with the campaign, I just like to govern. I don't like to knock doors, I don't like to fundraise, I don't like all that goes along with the campaign, I just want to go and govern and make a difference. What I see now in 2016 and 2015 is people who want to be engaged in perpetual campaigns. And campaigning has assumed a superior position to governing, where we can campaign people who want to serve as a senator or a state representative or a governor and tell everybody that we're going to talk to all the wonderful things we're going to do. But we never have to declare the compromises that we made and the disappointments, the small disappointments that we might have to provide to constituents, but instead hold out for purity in the world of campaigning, where we just talk about all of the things we're going to do for you and never talk about a compromise. We have to get back to governing. Governing requires compromise. We're not there. I hope we get there.
Thank you, Representative Carroll. Representative Paszynski.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having us. This is a great example of democracy, and that's exactly, and we all know that that's a tough form of government, but as they say, it's the best form. I'm going to lead off with a statement by Thomas Jefferson, who once said, "The people deserve the government they elect." Somebody elected these fools. Oh, that's us. And fools we might be, but I can tell you that all of us here at the table and so many of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle really go there to try to fix things and try to improve things and try to do their job to make life better for the people they represent. The key points here that I'd like to emphasize is what has already been said. Gerrymandering is a problem. There's way too much money in politics now. Regular folks that would be great legislators, folks like you in this room, would be forced to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and now for the presidency, billion? Please, $1 billion, is that what it's going to take? No, it's going to be billions. So what's happened is you've lost your government. You've lost your democracy. There's only 30% of the people vote. 40% of the people vote. Who voted in the last election here just in Luzerne County? Was it 20-some%? So there's a disconnect. You are the government, but you must be informed. But you can't be informed because you listen to one television station and they say, this is a cup, and you listen to the other television station, they said, no, it's not a cup. This is a glass. You don't know who to believe. That's why it's going to take work on your part as well to find the truth. And there's truth. Because as you go and you actually begin to peel the lemon back or peel the onion back, you're going to be able to see who's telling the truth and who's misleading you. I'm not going to tell you who that is, because we said we were going to play nice. But you know what? We do play nice. We don't do the negotiating because we're not the leaders. But we try through our channels to get our message to our leaders to say how we feel about different subjects. And we stand in our caucuses and voice those opinions very loudly, whether we support something or not. That then determines what course of action they take. All my colleagues before me said all valuable things, but it still comes back to the fact, the idea to compromise. Right now you have a group that's in power. It's their way or no way. That's the problem.
Thank you, Representative Paszynski. Well done. That was succinct. Representative Tara Tuhill.
That's very rare.
Good morning, everyone.
We know, Eddie.
Good morning. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, of course, for hosting this once again. I'm very glad to be here with all of you this morning. On the issue of the budget has been extremely frustrating. It has been the most frustrating budget that I've ever been through. We've had 5 years of on-time, no-tax budgets, and that's a very important part. We have increased education money every year. Education's a big component, and when every year we've done that, we've had on-time budgets, and now this budget, we did have a June 30th on-time budget that went through, and it's important to understand in other budgets, in 50 years, we haven't had a governor who has vetoed the entire budget. So unfortunately, the entire budget was thrown in the garbage can, and that caused us to have hostages, that caused us to have school districts that don't have their money, human services, victims resources, blind association, all those people not getting their money. And Governor Rendell, to his credit, he never vetoed an entire budget and put us in this sort of a situation. And I think that Governor Wolf is a really nice guy, and I think that he didn't realize the impact of what throwing the entire budget in the garbage was going to have. And so that put us in this situation where you have this whole system where you say, well, you have the Republican House and it's a Republican majority Senate as well, and a Democratic governor. So you have a divided government, and you're trying to get people to work together. And I think Governor Wolf, he's looking at what a lot of us at this table, especially in the Northeast, constantly we talk about property tax relief and trying to reach property tax relief. So if you're going to raise taxes on the people, personal income tax and sales tax, then they better be getting something in exchange for that. And I think many people agree, okay, raise my personal income tax, raise my sales tax, but please let me keep my home. Please help my family preserve our house. And I think that that's an area where there's a lot of ability to have a compromise. But I think our whole budget system, the whole culture of the budget in Harrisburg, it's not like other states. Other states have biannual budgets. I think they have a lot more functional budgets. And instead, we have this culture where it's like, well, we're going to throw in, we're going to squeeze in massive pension reform, and we're going to squeeze in liquor privatization, property tax reform. We're going to try to do all these huge heavy lifts and get that all in there. And it's kind of like an eye for an eye, like this for that. The Senate's not doing this unless the House does that. And it creates this whole culture of dysfunction when you're tying in all these other votes, when really it's like, the schools deserve their money. They shouldn't be put in this position year after year to say, are we getting what we're supposed to have? What's going to let us operate? So we need changes on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Tuhill. Senator Yudichak.
There is hope. There is hope in this great world. I've been here, I think, 20 times now, and That is the shortest homily by Reverend Pershinsky that I've seen in all these many years. So there is hope. Also, I'm sure that everyone came here today, as I did, with the burning question that was on everyone's mind. Why does Representative Coffer wear an orange tie every day? It was also the #1 question on Teen Beat magazine. We have that answer today. One of the things that I think Representative Carroll made an important phrase that needs to be underlined, the perpetual campaign nature of Harrisburg, of Washington. That's a big difference of where we are today in terms of our budget, in terms of politics in general. It's probably for our political scientists like Dr. Baldino, I think you could probably do a graph and show the 24-hour news cycle has led to a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week campaign cycle. And that hurts governing. Governor Wolf, as Representative Toohill mentioned, is a tremendous guy, and he has wonderful ideas and good intentions. But he did something unprecedented. He initiated television commercials and mail pieces during the budget cycle. That's never been done in the history of Pennsylvania. I told the governor and his staff I thought that was a bad idea. You created a campaign cycle within the budget cycle, and that's made it very difficult to get things done. But one of the things that's really been missed by the 24-hour news cycle is that we did pass a consensus budget, a $30.8 billion budget in the Senate that included pension reform and liquor reform that was sent over the House and unfortunately didn't get its day on the board for an up and down vote. But, you know, Senator Blake and I are both in Senate Democratic leadership. He's done a yeoman's job on the pension issue. I've been on the issue of the severance tax and been in those negotiating rooms. And it is frustrating when you see whether it is the governor on the left or the Republican legislative leaders on the right dig into their ideology and into this mindset of saints versus sinners. We are saints, the other side is sinners. We are all imperfect souls. And sooner that we realize that in politics and recognize that the public, the general public, really, Republican and Democrat in these partisan ideological battles, really are just for the folks that are in that perpetual campaign mode. Mr. and Mrs. Jones on Franklin Street in Wilkes-Barre want to make sure that the trains run on time, the roads are plowed and paved, the potholes fixed, their kids get a shot at a good education, they get a shot at a good job, and that everybody's got decent, quality, affordable health care. They're the issues that they want to focus on. Unfortunately, that partisanship gets away from the real tough decision. That's one thing that I also want to underscore. We have a budget deficit that is going to continue to balloon. And by 2020, it will be over $2 billion. We have $1.9 billion that are in fixed growth rate. So it's not about, oh, folks want to spend more than they have. You have Medicaid and long-term care, two issues that are very difficult to deal with. We're not talking about those difficult issues because we're talking about the partisan stuff that unfortunately gets us away from the important debate and the important decisions that we have to make for Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Senator Udicek. Thank you, all of you. I know it was a difficult question. And I realize redistricting, polarization within the parties, campaigning are problems that you individually can't conquer, but we appreciate your insight. I would like to, we're going to start with Representative Coffer. And Representative Toohill talked about property tax reform as discussed as a potential solution to funding and bring compromise. So if you wish, I have a question from the audience that's more specific, but you may speak to property tax reform, and these responses will be limited to approximately 2 minutes. However, from the audience, if ever property tax reform, which protects and ensures the current level of funding for over 500 school districts, how would that continue to protect them, but also other views on how you think that reform should go about? Representative Coffer.
There's been several proposals out there. The most popular one that we hear is House Bill, Senate Bill 76, which is property tax elimination. Actually, we have several people up here that are prime sponsors of it. I know Representative Mullery is in the House. Senator Udicek is in the Senate. And what it would do is shift the way that we collect it off the property tax formula to an increase in the sales tax and an income tax level to equitably fund our schools, drive the money back, and make sure they're well funded. I want to double back on something, then I'll talk a little bit more about it, because there was something tied into there of what Representative Toohill said before, of what are the points of compromise in this budget. And I think if you ask everybody, they might have a similar answer, but if you go around and say, what are the things we can actually compromise on? Property tax reform, I bet you, would be at the high point of a lot of the people at this table and a lot of the legislators all around Pennsylvania. Property tax reform, a severance tax, I think, would have bipartisan, large majority to support. So where are the points that we can actually get real compromise done on? And at one point, these are both part of a conversation of what the compromise budget was going to look like. They were both taken from the table, which for me was disappointing. Now, I know Representative Pashinsky mentioned this before. You know, we're not at the negotiating table. They come back and they say, here's what we've negotiated. Do you like it? Don't you? And for me, as being somebody, I'm willing to make a deal. What is going to be that point of compromise? Those are, I think, are two that I think people in this area especially want to see. And they're fed up with it. They're fed up with the perpetual cycle. But I think property tax reform right now is the #1 issue of northeastern Pennsylvania. I think it's all across the Commonwealth, but it's a regional issue. And because of our lower wages in Luzerne County, Lackawanna County, that the percentage of what goes to property tax is a much higher percentage than it is in other places. Other places have a much higher property tax, whether it's $12,000 or $14,000 a home in Monroe County. Ours are very high relative to what our actual wages are in this area. So taking that into consideration, your percentage of your wage to what actually goes to property taxes, we're getting hammered in here. And just drive around, you can see the homes for sale. Seniors can't stay in their homes. Younger people can't afford the down payment, plus the mortgage, plus the property taxes on top of it. So I really believe that's the #1 issue that we're facing in our region right now.
Thank you. Senator Blake.
So I think that it would be important for me to draw some connection between what Senator Udicek and others at this panel have said regarding our political culture and this issue, property tax relief. So if property tax relief were to be signed into law by Governor Wolf, does anybody think that that might be a popular thing for this governor?
Yes.
It would be. But do you think that the Republican majorities in the houses of the General Assembly would like to give him that benefit?
Yes, I would.
I do.
Well, in any case, I'm just saying that's part of what goes on in the calculus. It is a problem. Our property tax system has been flawed. It is punitive to our seniors. It is difficult for young families starting out. The Senate Bill 76 debate has raged in Harrisburg for the 5 years I've been down there. I actually voted for Senate Bill 76 out of the Finance Committee because I felt like, even though I thought it might be flawed legislation, and I do believe that in its current form it's flawed legislation. However, there is a way to provide property tax relief, and there is a way to find bipartisan support for property tax relief. We should be working on that. We should be trying to deliver that to the governor's desk. The Senate Democratic Caucus put up a plan of our own that would have provided up to $1,950. It would have eliminated property taxes for about 2 million Pennsylvanians, and it would have provided a rebate for renters. So there's been a lot of proposals back and forth, but they've never been reconciled to the point where we can get those votes in both chambers and that signature by the governor. So I agree, it's a primary issue. Severance tax issue, if the Republican majorities in either house of the General Assembly brought a 5% reasonable severance tax and kept the impact fee in place, I would tell you that it would vote with the majority votes on the floor of both houses. Right now, if it were brought to a vote. But it's not being brought to a vote because it's a contentious issue and leadership is holding on to that. I think it'll happen this year. I think Senator Scarnati has indicated it's probably going to be part of the solution set. So we'll get there.
Thank you, Senator Blake. Representative Carroll.
Thank you very much. The whole property tax relief and elimination discussion has been going on for many, many years, more than I can remember, measured in numbers greater than 10 for sure. What my observation is with respect to property tax elimination or relief is that we need to focus our efforts on homesteads primarily. For me, the whole House Bill, Senate Bill 76 discussion has been helpful from the perspective of having a discussion relative to how we fund our public schools and providing some relief to homeowners, especially senior citizens on fixed incomes. But it is a very tough nut for me to consider an income tax increase on somebody who's changing tires at a tire shop in Pittston while we wipe out property taxes on commercial properties and vacation homes at Lake Wolfpack owned by people from New Jersey. You know, asking that person who's changing tires and making a modest living to pay more in an income tax so that we can wipe out property taxes for every single commercial property. Take, for example, the casino. They will probably send us a thank you note if they don't have to pay a property tax anymore. But we will have people who are earning $20,000 and $30,000 paying more in an income tax. I'd far prefer to have a conversation relative to modest property tax relief for all and targeted property tax relief for senior citizens who have a fixed income with modest means. We really, when we have these conversations of we're going to provide perfection, and it's just going to be a simplistic wipe out property taxes, game over. How's that working out? I mean, it hasn't happened for at least 20 years. Maybe it's time to recalibrate and say, let's have modest increases in income tax and sales tax, provide the relief that we can to homeowners that really need it, and move on from there.
Thank you. Representative Paszynski.
Thank you very much. We'll stay a little bit focused very briefly on the severance tax. I think that's a pretty easy one. We're the only state that doesn't have it. We should have had it well back into 2008, 2009, something that's fair and appropriate, and I'll let the experts decide what's fair and appropriate. But right now, Pennsylvania, we have lost $1 billion at least because we didn't have the right kind of tax on that industry. Now, to put the tax on it now, you're not going to get those dollars. But the tax needs to be put on that's fair, and Democrats have been floating a type of a formula that allows for a lower percentage when they're not making money and a higher percentage when they are. But it's coming. They're going to have to pay their due. When it comes to property tax, who would not want to have their property taxes eliminated? Everyone wants to have their property taxes eliminated. Now, where do you come up with $12 to $14 billion? That's what the property taxes generate. So there has to be either a new source of money, whether it comes from gambling, sports betting, gas. All of a sudden, we tax marijuana. The bottom line is we don't have a $14 billion source, so the only way we can do it is we have to raise the personal income tax and expand and raise your sales tax. That's the only way you're going to be able to eliminate the $14 billion. And I venture to say, all of you out here have every opportunity to fix it. Tell me how you're going to raise that property, or how you're going to eliminate the property tax by raising your sales and expanding the sales and raising your PIT. Someone in here will say, well, I'd rather the PIT. That would be the easiest thing, which I personally believe it is, because we generate $4 billion with 1% increase. And we are the second lowest in PIT. Someone will say, wait a minute, I want more people to pay because they should increase the sales tax. That way everybody has to buy something, they have to pay for it. Well, that's okay until you begin to expand it and realize that you either have to raise it to 8%, which means Philly would be 10%, which means their economy would collapse. The point is, it's not as easy as it appears. What you, the public, sees is the tip of the iceberg. What we see is the whole iceberg. And that's the problem, trying to maneuver through that system.
Thank you. Representative Toohill.
Thank you. With regard to property tax relief, I think that we are getting very close because we do have a House and a Senate that knows how important it is, and it is on the top item list for the governor. So I do think it's a good thing. I know that once the governor took office, I know that he started to hear from all of the legislators, and many of us in many places, especially in the Northeast, when we talk to him, we say, listen, people are losing their homes where we're from. And I, in particular, I grew up in a home that was constantly up on the foreclosure list. And when you're growing up in a home where there's instability and you look at losing your family home year after year, it's obviously a very stressful environment in the home. It's a stressful environment for the children. It's hard on your parents. And really, we dealt with that, and it was a constant factor, and it's still something that affects my family personally. So it's something that I concentrate a lot on. And unfortunately, I mean, the Senate did make a lot of headway recently, and it even came so close. I mean, you can Google it and look it up again, but it came so close that the lieutenant governor came in and there was a tie-breaking vote. So now we have to rehash that in the House, and I think property tax relief has been argued for since the 1960s. It's something that is something we definitely need to work on. And if you look at, like Representative Carroll was saying with the homesteading, it should be a real family home. It should be a real family home. There's 65-year-olds that are having this problem, 70-year-olds that are having this problem, in particular our seniors on fixed incomes, but our middle class as well, younger people are having a very hard time with property taxes. But I think that obviously you don't want to have corporate welfare when you're doing this property tax relief. So I think if we could pinpoint, who are we going to be helping under this scenario, even with people 65 and up, it's a much easier, an easier fix, because you're dealing with less people in the population. And a lot of people have been against that because they don't want to create a nanny state. But look at why people go to Florida, because they know, hey, listen, I can at least do my budget for the next 5 years and know how I'm going to be able to live. So hopefully we're going to be able to make an effort in that direction and seal the deal on it, because I think that many people at this table and the Senate, the House, and the governor as well know that this is an important issue.
Thank you. Senator Udicek.
Thank you. Property tax reform, property tax relief, property tax elimination has been the #1 issue of my political career. My very first election, it was a priority issue, and it remains today. And I look at it from this perspective. We need to eliminate property tax as the primary source of school funding. It's a 19th century tax, and we want 21st century schools. And it penalizes and punishes those communities and those school districts that simply have no capacity to raise revenue. So that by virtue of your zip code, you may be denied what I think is your constitutional right in Pennsylvania, a fair and adequate education. We should not be a society of haves and have-nots when it comes to public education. I think it's been the greatest incentive to build our country, our Commonwealth, and this great democracy, affording kids an opportunity to empower their lives through education. We're seeing great disparity. And matter of fact, Pennsylvania has the biggest disparity between investments in education at the high end in the suburbs of Philadelphia, where they may be spending $27,000, $28,000 a kid, versus somewhere in northeastern Pennsylvania where they're spending $6,000 to $7,000. We shouldn't have that great of a disparity. And so that's my perspective and where I come from on the property tax issue. And I am a supporter of Senate Bill 76. And the reason I am, and there's certainly flaws to that bill, but in Harrisburg, you have to move the ball down the field. You have to keep moving the ball down the field. And I'm not partisan in any way, so I say this with love, but during the 4 years of the Republican administration, we had a Republican House and a Republican Senate and a Republican governor. We didn't get a vote in the Senate on property tax relief and elimination. We got a vote for the first time in the history of Pennsylvania on Senate Bill 76. It failed 24-24. And the games that are played, that means that bill is dead, 24-24. The lieutenant governor voted in the negative, made it 25-24, and immediately to the Twitter and to social media, the Wolf administration killed property tax relief in Pennsylvania. It's just not true. The bill was dead. It didn't have the support of the majority party, and it failed. But there is consensus being built. We had Act 1 under Governor Rendell, which not only advanced property tax relief across Pennsylvania, expanded the property tax rebate tremendously, where 40% of the seniors in Luzerne County had their property taxes eliminated. I think we should focus more on that. Those are the greatest need. But it also limited how local school districts can raise their taxes to an index. And if you see that chart over that period of time, it really has suppressed the increases in property taxes. So we've made some progress. there's been an opportunity to build bipartisan compromise around the issue, but it is a tough, complex issue that we're going to have to continue to move that ball down the field and keep moving that ball down the field and advancing the issue of property tax relief.
Thank you. Representative Mullery.
Well, I think a lot of what I'm going to say will echo what John just said. And there's a reason for that. We're from the same town. I took over his legislative district when he moved on to the Senate. Property tax relief is the #1 issue in the 119th legislative district. It is the #1 topic of conversation I have with my constituents when either they're in the office, they see me at a ball game, or they run into me in the store. Folks who cannot tell you the bill number of any bill in the House, the Senate, or in Congress know HB and SB 76, and they know the general dynamic of the bill and how they believe it will affect them. It is a heavy lift, as you've heard from all of my colleagues, but I've been willing to shoulder that lift for 6 years. I'm proud to be one of the 10 bipartisan prime sponsors of the bill in the House. That being said, it appears that as a state government, we are only willing to progress on property tax relief in a moderate manner. What does that mean? That means when we had a chance to vote on a budget bill that included property tax relief in either October or November, it included relief for our most vulnerable citizens, the elderly, the disabled, and veterans. That bill failed 100% along party lines, if I believe. I'm correct on that, and my colleagues can correct me if I'm not. I will strike a different tone than Mike Carroll, who I respect greatly. I think you have to provide property tax relief to businesses. When you look at Pennsylvania as a destination for businesses who want to relocate, how attractive are we when we are 48th, 47th ranked for tax burden for businesses? So I think by eliminating property taxes, significantly reducing property taxes, you're going to see our current businesses reinvest in themselves, you're going to see our current businesses expand, and you're going to make Pennsylvania a destination for recruiting and attracting new businesses.
Thank you. Our next question will go first to Senator Blake. I have a few questions from the audience I'd like to put out there for the legislators. And at this point, we have about an hour left in the program. In order to cover more, choose what you can best address. Give you some options. I have a question from the audience. How are you planning on helping PA make the Clean Power Plan a success? I also have, after the close of 10 years with the natural gas industry, what do you see as what went benefiting from that in the future, and also we have form. Yes, whatever you feel.
So I'll answer the last one first. Chairman of the Senate, pension. And I'll try to do respect to it. That is about part of the to make contributions to the system. If are in the Democratic caucus to advance pensions, really for don't blow up the and exacerbate an already guarantee retirement security for our workers and state workers. Some fiscal relief to our state budget. And the third and the last one is to contract and have us in court. We lost that battle in the past. A negotiated agreement on pension and that we got as close as we can get to our 4 for pension reform. Still reservations about with, I believe, Democratic votes. A fair back at the drawing works. Because I believe is very sticky, and certainly reasonable, responsible state reform as currency support for all the things that
absolutely important. The whole where but minimal I've taken advantage. And I think that